let's get to the waiver wire priorities here. And, Jamey, you can start. Who would be your top 3 overall waiver wire priorities?
For me, Woody Marks is still 1, so that's an easy one just based on what he did and hopefully what he's going to continue to do. 2 for me would be Darius Slayton, what he was able to accomplish in the 2 games without Malik Neighbors last year. Hopefully a sign of things to come. And then Darren Waller, kudos to you, Adam. You kept saying, well, what if he does what Jonnu Smith does? Well, he looked like he's going to do what Jonnu Smith does. And Jonnu Smith averaged 13.1 PPR points per game last year for the Dolphins. And now no Tyreek Hill. So as long as Waller stays healthy, he should continue to get more work and hopefully a lot more production. So especially with a matchup on tap against the Panthers this week, those are the top 3 for me.
Woody Marks, Darius Slayton, Darren Waller. So Waller, when I said in the preseason, can he do what Jonnu Smith did? All I meant was Jonnu Smith had one of the lowest ADOTs last year. Dave pointed it out to me first, but he had so many catches that were behind the line of scrimmage. One of the most, I forget what it was. It was like almost a record for catches behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage. And he just got a lot of cheap fantasy points like that. I kind of felt like anyone could do that. Darren Waller didn't do that much yesterday, but he caught 2 touchdowns. And I just would caution, he really didn't play that much.
No.
He ran something, like 12 routes. So we're hoping that he ran 10 routes. That it's going to continue. You have to wonder what his role is going to be as he really can't stay healthy, right? So I just want to bring that angle up to it, part of it. All right, Dave, give me your top 3, and then I really want to talk about where Sean Tucker and Rachaad White would rank in here, because Rachaad White's 45% rostered on Sleeper, so he's available on most platforms. But give me your top 3, Dave.
Morning, everybody. I have the same top 3. I don't have really anything to add other than what you kind of said about Waller and how he wasn't used. He was used more like Waller than he was Jonnu Smith, but he could always be used as a short area target like Jonnu Smith was. I think there's just more to his game. Hopefully we're seeing him ramped up and he does become pretty close to a full-time player. Let me give you 2 other names. One is Brenton Strange, who's available in 53% of leagues. It's not very sexy, but he gets you some decent PPR points. He's had at least 10.5 full PPR points in each of his past 2 games. We are struggling at tight end right now. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate toward him, especially with the bye weeks hitting. And then Malik Washington, I think, is going to end up being the Dolphins receiver who sees the most targets in place of Tyreek Hill. He didn't see the most snaps in place of Tyreek Hill. That was Westbrook Akine, but I don't know if they want to use Akine the same way they use Washington. I remember seeing them use Washington on a bunch of screens and short throws in practice when I went to see them practice, and he's fast. You saw that. You've seen it, obviously, before this week, but certainly after Tyreek Hill went down, he got a little bit of work. I think that role might stay the same for him, but he gets a few more targets on top of it. Not a priority, but certainly a lot of people are struggling at receiver right now. And there's somebody that lost Tyreek Hill or Malik Neighbors. If you can't get your hands on a Giants wide receiver, maybe Malik Washington is somebody that you settle for with your 4th, 5th, 6th waiver claim.
So as we talk about the Bucs running backs, we have no idea what the severity of the injury is, but he is getting an MRI, right? It's, Bucky Irving. So when I look at Woody Marks, obviously I think we all see this potential for this role to grow and for him to be a potential fantasy number 2 running back or something like that. And it was a really good setup for him last week against the Titans.
And a really good setup this week against the Ravens.
Yeah, Ravens are actually giving up the most fantasy points to running backs. Then I think he has a bye after that, but whatever. Maybe look, Jackson Dart threw for 111 yards last week. He's obviously going to run the ball a lot. I don't know that Darius Slayton's going to be in your lineup most weeks. I hope so. He had 11 targets in each of the 2 games he played without Malik Neighbors last year. His role changes without Malik Neighbors. He becomes less of a vertical threat and more of an lower ADOT, lower route depth, more of a reliable type of role.
I do think in the case of Slayton, you make a very good point about what the offense looked like. It was Jackson Dart's first start. They were playing with a lead. How often do we expect them to play with a lead? And as he gets more comfortable, they're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot more. So I do think Darius Slayton's going to have a lot of big games coming. Now, to what extent, we'll find out, because still Wan'Dale Robinson will work in. Obviously, they'll use some other guys, so just going based on the 2-game sample size without Malik Neighbors is not exactly the safest way to go, because both those guys saw a huge uptick in targets in terms of Slayton and Wan'Dale in the 2 games that Neighbors missed last year. So I don't think it's a slam dunk. It's just a huge opportunity for him. And to Dave's point, just to go back to this, there are a lot of receivers this week that are stepping
Yeah.
into potential big roles. So it's Slayton long term. It's Malik Washington potentially long term, because it could be Westbrook Akine. They could go and get somebody to maybe fill this role. You have both 49ers guys potentially not playing on Thursday night. So DeMarcus Robinson or Kendrick Bourne could be in huge roles this week and getting a lot of targets. Again, probably a short-term situation, and they're not great, but opportunities are there. So there's a lot of moving parts with this week's waiver wire stuff. And then you factor in the 4 teams on a bye. It's going to look a lot of like, I don't know for you, Dave, like the rankings look very weird to me,
Dude.
In trying to get 150 players for our flex rankings. It was like, Adam Aizer, player ID number 45. I was putting random names in there just to fill spots.
Like at some point, you're going to have Kyle Juszczyk in your top 150. Week 8 is the big bye NATO. There's 6 teams on bye then.
At some point, Kyle Juszczyk is 65.
Yeah, it's crazy.